why do you think Hamas took the hostages except to use as a human shield? And they are using also all the population of Gaza as a human shield. So do the Israelis stop all action because of the hostages and therefore play into Hamas's hands? Or do they realize that actually they have to proceed in a way which none of us find acceptable? None of us find it, well, not acceptable, none of us find desirable, but Hamas wish to destroy Israel and all Israelis, as we saw on October the 7th. They wish to eliminate the Jews in Israel.
Let's head over to the Middle East for a while, because Rishi Sunak's confirmed that UK Border Force agents have been sent to Egypt to help evacuate British citizens from Gaza if and when the Rafah crossing reopens. 200 Britons in Gaza have contacted the Foreign Office ahead of Israel's planned invasion. Meanwhile, Israel says its crossing of tanks into Gazan territory overnight is preparation for the next stage of its fight against Hamas. Well, Lord Rabathan is the Conservative peer and former Armed Forces Minister. Lord Rabathan, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thanks very much for joining us tonight. Can you kind of explain to us, if you can, how what the job of these border officials might be if that crossing does reopen?
Well, I'm not sure I can explain it to you, but I guess they're there to identify British citizens who have a right to come back to the United Kingdom, is my guess. The situation is intractable, is ghastly. If anybody has an answer, perhaps they might put it forward, but it's just awful. I was in Israel and the West Bank in Ramallah in June, and I'm afraid the whole issue is shocking. I don't have any answers. I can tell you a few things, but I don't have any answers to how we sort this out. But one thing we need to remember is that this is a shocking situation where a terrorist attack on civilians in Israel was launched, and we then had thousands of people in the streets of London cheering and celebrating the mass murder of Jews, something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime.
Just on the issue of getting British nationals out, you touched on two things. There are the British nationals who are currently held by Hamas, and there are also the British nationals who are in Gaza. Now, it seems very difficult a task for those hostages, of which Hamas claim 50 have been killed so far, to get those hostages out, because the bombing that is going on, it may affect the hostages, because those hostages themselves are thought to be underground.
Well, Rick, of course, you're absolutely right. And that, why do you think Hamas took the hostages except to use as a human shield? And they are using also all the population of Gaza as a human shield. So do the Israelis stop all action because of the hostages and therefore play into Hamas's hands? Or do they realize that actually they have to proceed in a way which none of us find acceptable? None of us find it, well, not acceptable, none of us find desirable, but Hamas wish to destroy Israel and all Israelis, as we saw on October the 7th. They wish to eliminate the Jews in Israel. Now, I'm sorry, this is something which I grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust. I cannot believe this is happening. It's just so unbelievably shocking. Now, what do we do? Well, yes, we can try and get British citizens out, but actually I think we should also show steadfast support for Israel, which is under an existential threat, a threat to destroy itself and all the people in Israel to be eliminated, just as happened in the 1930s and 40s.
On that, we've heard the EU tonight call for a pause in fighting to get people out. And Rishi Sunak has said today that there needed to be a safer environment which necessitates specific pauses which are distinct from ceasefire. I mean, can you kind of explain how a pause is different from a ceasefire?
I'm not sure that I can, but what I would say to you is this. I'd quote Golda Meir, who allegedly said in about 1973, after the Yom Kippur War, that if the Palestinians laid down their arms, there would be peace. But if the Israelis laid down their arms, there'll be a massacre. And I think that's been proved over the last couple of weeks. A pause, yes. For God's sake, we all want to see an end of bloodshed.
But there are innocent Palestinian people who obviously
the
want to get
Palestinians
out.
are innocent. One should say that Hamas were back in 2005 or 2007 elected as the leadership in Gaza, although they haven't had an opportunity to vote again. Of course, the Palestinians are innocent, but I say to everybody, including you, Rick, if you were in Israel, what would you do? Because Hamas are determined to eradicate and destroy every Israeli and Israel. So what would you do?
If we got to a stage where the Israelis take control of Gaza, what happens next? Is there an occupation, or how long could that last? Would there be a peacekeeping force? Would they ask the UN to come in? What do you think would be what do you think would be once they've occupied? What comes next?
Well, I don't think they want to occupy it at all. Don't forget that, and some of your people listening may not know this. In 2005, the Israelis withdrew from Gaza,
yes,
having occupied it beforehand, because they didn't want to occupy it. They wanted to leave Gaza to the Palestinians. And there was a lot of talk about Gaza becoming a new Singapore. Unfortunately, the governments of Gaza, in particular Hamas, have prevented any form of entrepreneurial activity like that. And, what would we do? The United Nations has run endless missions in Israel, Gaza, Palestine, and nothing has happened. I don't have a solution. I don't think anybody does. But one thing I do know is that if I were an Israeli, I would say, well, for God's sake, we have to survive, and therefore we have to take action. Now, I have absolutely every sympathy with Palestinian people, and I've been to Gaza, and I think it's pretty shocking. I have every sympathy with people in Palestine and in Gaza who are in the firing line. However, the problem is that Hamas are using the people of Gaza as a human shield. Now, what do you do? What do you do? What would you do? And that's the question we must all ask ourselves. What would you do?
Lord Rabathan, thanks so much for your time tonight, speaking to us. Lord Rabathan, the Conservative peer, former Armed Forces Minister, speaking to us on Times Radio tonight. Just to refresh what's happening.